I'm reading out of Elysium, A Return to Elysium. This is Joan Marshall Grant, her life as Lucina, and this is chapter 10. This plays in Greece, ancient Greece, 2nd century BC, and I spent £3.50 on a pair of glasses because I'm reading towards the evening, and then I like to look a bit clearer, so it's worth the money, I guess. The Seer. Oh, in many small ways, they all showed me a new consideration which I found it difficult to accept. In many ways, they all showed me a new consideration which I found it difficult to accept. No one said openly that they thought I was in love, but it was obvious from the way they spoke of Cleon in my presence. The evening I heard he would be delayed in Delos another month, perhaps longer, I was deliberately gay. I made Epicurus laugh immoderately, defeated Euripides in a duel of wits, and when the long meal was over, I danced for Praxiteles in the moonlight, until he said he must keep me safe for eternity in a freeze. Yet Asclepius was not deceived. He was only sorry for me, and because of this I cried myself to sleep. The next morning he called me to his room. There was a half-empty goblet on the table, though he seldom drank wine before the noon meal. "Lucina," he said gently, "I know that you feel I have not shown a proper sympathy for your perception, which is more subtle than my own. I thought there was a chance you might accept my explanation of certain experiences I was unable to share. I failed to convince you, and now I suggest that together we should explore this unfamiliar territory." For the first time since Cleon left, I found it easy to think of something else. At last I was again to be treated as a person instead of a patient. Asclepius smiled. "So, Lucina has not entirely forgotten that truth eludes those who do not seek her." "I shall never forget it, unless you are able to convince me she doesn't exist." The words were sharp, but I knew they were spoken in affection. He laughed like a boy. "I have always boasted that there was no risk I was unwilling to accept if it brought me closer to reality. I now freely admit that when I found something which would not yield to explanation, I tried to pretend it was only an illusion. If I had not been correct in my analysis of the phenomena which you experienced, you would have believed me. Now it is our duty to determine whether you employ some faculty which as yet I cannot fully understand." But have I ever claimed more than that? No and yes, the question is complex. Unfortunately, you have a special genius for such questions. Do you agree to undertake an experiment, which is not without risk, and to abide by the result, which I believe will satisfy us both? Am I such an unwilling pupil that you need to ask? You must believe, Lucina, that I am not setting a trap for you. This is not another cloak of Tyrian purple. Of that I give you my most solemn word." He smiled. "If it were not against our tradition, I would offer to swear an oath by all the gods to prove my sincerity." "Does gold demand silver leaf to make it noble? Why then should an oath be added to the word of Asclepius?" The philosopher blushed, and we laughed together. "I have arranged," he said, "for a physician of Athens, a man who has long been interested in my findings as to the effect of the mind on the body, to send me 4 of his patients with whom he has failed to produce any improvement. I do not wish the others to know what we are doing, for if we learn nothing, we can share our ignorance in decent privacy. I shall announce my intention of taking you to Athens for a few days. In fact, we shall go to a cottage, which came into my possession last year when the owner died. I had done him a small kindness he wished to repay." A cottage instead of a cook to Asclepius. A cottage instead of a cock to Asclepius, and not, I hope, an empty tribute. What shall I have to do? I want us both to discover to what extent you can discern the latent fears of a stranger with whom you have had no previous contact. I have, after most serious consideration, decided that you can no more cease from influencing people than you can cease to breathe. When I brought you here, I hoped to educate a female philosopher, but the blood of your mother is strong in you, and is creating a priest is creating a priest-physician. Remember that of every 100 people you will ever meet, even if you travel to the furthest countries of the known world, 90 will be haunted by fear. You can help to free them, and it is too great a destiny to be denied, too great an honor to betray. Before you die, Lucina, demand of history this accolade. Because I have lived, there is less fear among men. Because I kept faith, the lamp I lit can never be put out. Asclepius opened the door of the cottage, the theatre where I must see my dream, the stadium in which to contest the right of bays. It was a small room containing nothing more significant than a straw pallet, 2 wooden stools and a bench under the window. A fire smouldered on the hearth. He drew aside a faded curtain, which covered a niche in the wall. You will find bread, salt, and wine on the shelves, he said. The rest of the food is in the shed, where the previous owner kept his hay. Conditions here are primitive, but adequate, though no doubt they would embarrass Epicurus and appall Narcissus. There were 2 other doors. One led into the room where I was to sleep, for I saw the chest of clothes, which Narcissus had considered suitable for Athens. The other door was shut. Is that the storeroom? Asclepius smiled. It may prove to contain rare treasure. Why not look for yourself? It was empty except for a narrow bed with a pillow and 3 covers neatly folded. There was an outer door and a high window closed by a shutter. I realized what he meant by treasure. The patients were to be brought here. I had been so elated when Asclepius decided to treat me as an equal that I had not troubled about what I was expected to do. I realized with appalling clarity that I had no idea how to prove anything, nor did I know what manner of ordeal I was to undergo. What is going to happen? I said, hoping my dismay was not too obvious. The patients will sleep in here, assisted by a draught of poppy, while you remain with me in the other room. This was even worse than I expected. What do you want me to do? That is for you to decide. I do not wish to influence your judgment even by suggesting the possibilities. You're not going to tell me anything about them? The 4 people, I mean? I could not do so, even if I wished, for I am being kept in ignorance of their age, their affliction, even their nationality. They will each be dressed in a white tunic so that we can have no clue as to their rank. Each evening, soon after sunset, one will be brought here in a curtained litter. They will have taken the drug before they arrive to make sure that we cannot influence them by logic, reassurance, or any other ordinary means. The bearers will wait until I tell them that the patient is ready to leave, which will be after you have finished and when I have prepared a brief report to send to the physician. Until I return to Elysium, he will not send me news as to whether they show improvement, nor tell me from what disease of mind or body they suffered. I agreed willingly to this condition, for I think it best that we should not have any information which might make us unduly elated or depressed. You think that if I fail with the first one, I may not have the courage to try again? You will never lack courage, Lucina, or so I profoundly believe, but in justice to both of us, for I too am pledging my knowledge on this trial, it is vital that we should not be biased by previous success or failure. He smiled a little ruefully. You see, Lucina, in my time I have not been immune from the pleasures of rivalry. So he is very eager to prove that since I left Athens, my wits have mouldered in seclusion. It would be a satisfactory story for him to tell if we gave him cause, that the man who now calls himself Asclepius has become credulous. We can be sure that the 4 patients he selects will be those whom he believes incurable. I insisted that he sent 4, for even one effect will prove that there is more to understand than physicians have yet acknowledged. But perhaps he will not be able to set us an impossible task. We will remember Perseus and gain confidence that the hero has resources denied to his tormentors. Does it matter whom he sends? We shall either succeed or admit I have been a fool. Not a fool, Lucina, only someone who is so profoundly wished to believe that she deceived herself. Even apparent failure need not be decisive. For if he sends only those people who prefer their madness, their bodily affliction, their retreat from the press of ordinary living, to be free seal of integrity, when you can do nothing for them. You could do nothing even if you were endowed with all the powers which men claim for their gods. If a man or a woman prefers illness to the claims of health, no one can cure his body. If he chooses emotional instability instead of the demands of clear thinking, no one can cure his mind. If he prefers the temptation of evil, the comfortable cloak of guilt, to the light of ethical maturity, no one can cure his soul. The gods do not dwell remote on Olympus. They are instinct in the center of our being, both the core of the fruit and the host of the seed. If we accept that godliness, we are immortal. If we deny it, then Zeus, Juno, or Apollo, who are no greater than their statues, masks of stone by which men seek to hide their slow decay. I was sitting with Asclepius beside the hearth, watching the olive logs gently smoulder into white ash, when we heard the slow pace of men who carry a burden coming up the path that led to the door of the other room. Then came the creak of hinges, followed by a series of small sounds which told us that someone was being laid on the bed and covered with the 3 blankets. Again the door creaked and closed with a soft thud. "Do you want to see whether it's a man or a woman?" "No," I said slowly, "not until I have tried to find out for myself. I will not disturb you. It will not disturb you if I light the lamp?" I thought he offered this because I might be afraid of the dark, but the room was not really dark, and he was with me. "I don't need a lamp when I have you." "If it makes no difference, I should prefer one, for I want to keep an exact record of anything you may say." He set a flaring twig to the wick and then put the lamp on the floor beside him so that his body shielded me from the direct light. For a long time, I don't know how long by the ordinary measure of hours, nothing happened. What was I supposed to do? I had seen my mother without making any effort. I had seen the sword above Agamemnon because I had been looking for an imaginary spider. Perhaps if I pretended to be someone much wiser than Lucina, it would help. I might be able to get through the wall and look down on the person lying there. If I became one of my dream selves, I could enter the stranger's dream. But I must remember that I was also Lucina, or I should forget everything when I woke. Or worse than that, I should remember, and yes, Asclepius would think it was only a dream. I tried to remain between sleeping and waking, sitting cross-legged, my hands relaxed palm upwards on my knees. Cramp stabbed my thigh. I tried to ignore it, but I had to change my position. Small irrelevant thoughts bubbled up in my mind, making it difficult to keep it as a clear pool in which to see the wiser Lucina's vision. Would it be easier to relax if you lay flat? There was no anxiety in his voice, and I was reassured. I nodded, and he spread the blanket beside the fire and brought another with which to cover me. I curled up on my left side. It was not sleep which had to be fought against, but a persistent wakefulness. A steady beat sounded in the quiet room. I thought I was listening to my pulse until I realized it was rain, falling steadily, increasingly insistent. The rain was heavy, yet there was no wind, no mutter of distant thunder. It was not the season for rain. The fields would be a sea of mud if it went on much longer. The water would slide like snakes through the groves. Animals would flee from the rising water. And not only animals, people would try to reach the mountains. But it would be difficult to run through the clinging mud, ankle deep, knee deep. If I fall, the child will be drowned in the mud. Don't let me fall into the mud. The mud is cruel than the rain. It is more cruel than the rain. It's a hungry mouth trying to suck me into the last darkness. The child is screaming. Its hands are clutching at my hair because it knows I'm getting so tired, so cold, that I can't hold it securely on my shoulders. I try to tell it to keep still, but it can't hear me because of its screaming, because of the sound of the rain. The mud is getting deeper. It presses against my thighs. If I stand still, I shall sink too far to be able to move forward again. If I can keep moving, even so very slowly, we may much reach higher ground. The child is struggling. It won't listen to me. I can't hold it on my shoulders, for my hands are slipping with mud. Everything is mud. There's no solid rock, no cleanliness anywhere. I can't get the mud out of its nostrils. My hands are covered with mud. There is mud in its mouth. It's blind with mud. A dead child cannot breathe. A dead child. A dead child. I can hear someone speaking. The rain must have stopped, for I can hear the words. No voice could speak against the rain. Take the child to the clear pool. There can be no clear water in this sea of mud. How can I carry a dead child through the mud, which is slowly sucking me down? There is rock under the mud. Remember the rock, which is clean under the rain. My feet are bruised by the rock, but it's not cruel, not greedy, as the mud was greedy. The rock is stronger than the mud, so older than the mud. The rock is not afraid of the rain, because it is old as courage. The rain has ceased. That is why I can hear the voice. The rain has ceased. The rain has made a clear pool on the rock. My hands are clean because the mud is washed away. I can take the mud from the nostrils of the child, from its mouth, from its closed eyes. I thought the child was dead, the child of a slave whom I found crying in an abandoned house beside the causeway. But it opened its eyes. It's not dead. I am not dead. I'm part of the living rock, which the rain come to rescue from the mud. I'm free of the mud. I am free. Drink this, Lucina. The wine ran out of the corner of my mouth, though I tried to swallow. Lucina, I was sitting half upright, leaning against Asclepius' shoulder. He held the cup, and my teeth shattered against the rim. You will be better in a moment. Don't be frightened. I'm here with you. There is nothing to fear. I fell asleep, I said. I think I had a dream, but I can't remember much about it. I fell asleep soon after it began to rain. I stood up and then ran to unfasten the shutters. The bolt was stiff as my hands were too cold to pull it back. What are you doing? His voice was brisk, authoritative. I turned round. I only wanted to see if the fields were flooded. The path will be covered in deep mud. We must shout to warn the men not to try the path. They might be drowned in the mud. He drew back the shutters. It was difficult to make myself look out of the window. I was afraid of seeing a terrible desolation. Open your eyes, Lucina. You must never be afraid to see. The moon shone down on a quiet garden, a garden where paths were silver with a gleam of gentle moisture. On smooth stone, the trees were secure in kindly earth, which smelled clean with the memory of a summer shower. But I heard the rain, I said. It couldn't have been only a dream. I heard the rain. I felt the terrible hunger of the mud. It was not only a dream, Lucina. You have never talked in your sleep. You described to me an experience which I believe you shared with a woman who is now sleeping quietly in the next room. Did she wake? I said, trying to make myself calm enough to talk without emotion of an experiment, instead of being afraid to relive it again. I will tell you what happened when we have both had time to recover. But first we need something to eat and to drink. We need a proper fire to get warm. Feel, he gave me his hand. I'm nearly as cold as you are. He fetched logs and made the fire blaze. He heated broth, and we sat with hot bowls of it between our hands until the warmth made us feel secure, and I no longer had to keep tense to prevent myself shivering. Now I want to hear what happened, I said. I really want to. I'm not asking to pretend I wasn't frightened. Do you want me to read what you said while it was happening? Not yet, I admitted frankly. I can remember enough for tonight. Tomorrow it will only be words, but now it might be more. Too uncomfortable. And I stopped this first reading of chapter 10. Is it 11? This chapter, I think it was chapter 10 or 11, I've forgotten now. Anyway, it's the first part, and I'm going to read the rest tomorrow. This was The Seer, and it's the first part of chapter 11.